how to absolutely crush the Queen's Gambit and anybody who starts the game with 1d4 against you.
Hey guys, I'm a big fan of the content creator Gothamchess, but yesterday I ran into one of his videos where he was promising to defeat 1d4 in 6 moves. I saw he's promising to defeat the Queen's Gambit. Whoa, hey, that's my favorite opening. So I was very surprised, how is this possible? So I decided to check it out and let's see. So after the initial moves, d4, d5, c4, e5, this is the Albin Counter Gambit. It's kind of a serious opening, is very structurally sound. But of course, it is going to give white an advantage by force if white knows what he's doing. So you just take the pawn, d4, knight f3, knight c6. And till here, I think the analysis is of course the same between Levy and mine. And here he considers various options for white. He considered a3, he considered e3. So guys, what happens if a professional player or any serious player is recommending a line to you? So they have these ideas in mind where they want to show you, okay, I will put the pawn here, h4, h5, a4, a5, knight g5, queen h5, mate. And of course, your opponent is not forced to get checkmated here. So there will be some dull lines, some lines where there will be no attack. Your opponent will have no serious chances of creating any play. And when you kind of go through these lines as a title player, you will do something like this.
And by the way, should they play something else like knight d2, for example, you can do all the same stuff. You can play knight e7, knight d6, you can play bishop g4, queen e7, and cancel queenside, h6 is also an option. There's a lot of overlap.
So basically, these lines are the lines where black will probably not get any sort of attack. There are many options for black, and he has mentioned 3 options. I will tackle them one by one. Guys, first of all, let me mention the move I am taking here. So the move is knight d2. Now this does not look like an ambitious move to the layman's eye, but this is very, very ambitious. The idea is simply to play knight b3 and knight takes d4 at some point, and considering that the black bishop can only support the pawn from c5, the knight on b3 is perfectly placed. And black has to show something here. If black does nothing, white will simply capture the pawn on d4, black will capture the pawn on e5, and it will be a position where white is just a pawn up. So let's look at Levy's choices here. So he recommends 3 moves. He recommends knight e7, bishop g4, and he also recommends, I think, f6 here. We'll look at all of these options. In fact, in my file, I also have one more move for black. So let's look at 4 options. We start with the move which he recommends first, knight e7, which is, according to me, also the main line. And here, I would recommend simply playing knight b3, the idea behind our plan here, the basic idea. And after knight b3, your opponent has 2 options. So if he plays, for example, knight f5 to protect the pawn, which makes a lot of sense, I think, we play the move e4. Now this is an excellent move because it feels like it's going to spoil up pawn structure, but you have to remember, guys, black is not developed so well to take advantage of this. We have the extra pawn, the pawn on e5, which is stifling black's position. You can see the bishop cannot come to d6, knight on b3 is perfectly placed, preventing bishop c5. There are not many things going on in the position. So here black has 2 options. If bishop b4, bishop d2, knight h4, takes, and you can already see white is much better here. I think this position itself, pawn up, queenside castled, I think black is suffering here. So the main line after e4 would be d takes e3. And here is where we play queen takes d8. Well, let's say knight takes d8. And now f takes e3. Now this may feel like a position where white's pawn structure is spoiled. Maybe black will win back this pawn, but I kid you not, this is very difficult for black. So bishop b4 check feels like a logical move. King f2, protecting the pawn on e3. Knight e6, bishop d3, knight c5, takes, and now rook d1, castles, and bishop e4. And you see this structure where white can always support his pawn somehow on e5 as well. Black cannot even develop his bishop easily. The pawn on b7 is weak. There's an option of a3 and b4. I think white is clearly better here. If you check your engines, the evaluation will be plus 0.8 or something. According to Commodore 10, it is. And if you check the line, it is almost force. And I think white is definitely better in this line. And here in this position, black can also play bishop g4. As Levy mentioned, he can basically try to castle queenside, get an attack going with the similar ideas. For example, to g3 with h4, h5, maybe knight e7, knight e6 later, trying to capture the e5 pawn, but it's not so easy. So here we play the interesting move, queen to b3. So attacking the pawn on b7, black has to decide what to do here. It's not such a simple choice. In fact, there are very few games in this line. In fact, in the database, I can only find like tens of games. So here black has a few choices. he can of course play a move like queen d7, which I think is the main line here. And here you play the move h3, so asking the question, do you capture or do you go back? The bishop captures, I think. You capture with the pawn, and now you play f4. If black tries to capture this, well, he will be in for suffering after queen takes b7. So that is definitely not a choice. So he has to basically castle, protecting his pawn on b7. But now you play f4, and you can see how difficult black's position is. Well, white is going to play bishop g2, plonk his bishop on d5. There'll be a huge pressure on the black queen side, and d3 does nothing because white always has the option of simply pushing the pawn to e3 and closing the center, and this will be very difficult for black. Black maybe has f6, but I think white is a pawn up, has the bishop pair, and should have the better chances. Now if you come back, black simply plays rook b8, which feels like a normal move, but you have to remember his plan was to castle queenside. That is not possible now. And now you can simply play moves like a3, preventing any sort of checks here or knight b4s. And next you can go for the similar plan. You can even, for example, let's say knight e7, which was the only move played in this position. And now you simply play the move h3. The bishop has to decide what to do. Again, bishop h5 does not really do much. For example, one move here could be simply queen d1, bring the queen back, and preparing moves like g4 and knight b3, simply capturing the b4 pawn, and there's not much black can do about it. So when we go back, so bishop g4 is not a good idea, guys. Bishop g4 here will give white a serious advantage. Do not play this. Now, if we come to his third suggestion, that is the move f6. Now, f6 is the usual strategy in these ideas where you try to break open the center, get rid of this strong pawn on e5, and you try to show, okay, I sacrifice a pawn, but I will have the initiative. No, you won't. So you simply capture the pawn, knight takes f6, and now in this position, I think a3 is a really good move, preventing any sort of counterplay from black. And you have to remember, white has a score of more than 70% from this position, so this is definitely not a move to be taken for granted by black. So let's say black plays bishop g4, which is the common move played here, and here you simply play the move h3. So black has to again decide, if he captures, we capture. Well, this looks like a dream position for white, so he has to go back. But now you can even play g4, bishop g6, and finally bishop g2. And I don't see what is the problem with white's position here. In fact, white has the engine will tell you it's plus minus, more than plus minus 1. This is completely winning for white. He can go eventually b4, bishop b2, knight b3. How will you protect this pawn on d4? If you try pushing it, not only can I play moves like e3, which is decent enough, I can simply castle and ignore this because your king is in the center. This diagonal is open, this diagonal is strong. I think black will suffer here. And one more move, guys, one more move which Levi did not mention as a choice for black, and that is the move bishop to e6. And this is a very interesting choice. It's probably one of the best choices for black, but I think still white can simply play the move a3, which has a spectacular record for white, more than 69%. And here black would play a move like queen d7, which makes a lot of sense. Black has other choices, but the plan is pretty much the same. And now you play the move b4. So you're already attacking on the queen side. Let me flip the board and show you the circumstances. Would you castle queenside in this position? If you do, hats off to you. I don't have a hat, but hats off to you, because I would not. And this alone tells you what you need to know. This is not a position to be taken lightly by black. I cannot recommend this opening because it is very risky of black to play like this. And there are some attacking lines in the lines Levi mentioned for sure. But I think playing this move, knight d2, you bypass all of that, because you're not giving black a weakness by playing g3. You can already see after g3, the h5, h4 plan becomes a bit more interesting because there's a hook for black to attack. But this is not the case if you play knight d2. You're preventing bishop c5 literally. You're kind of putting pressure on the pawn on d4. And I think in most cases, black will eventually capture this pawn, but you will capture this pawn and you will be a pawn up. He will have a slight little development, but you can easily neutralize it. You'll also have the two bishops. So I think this is not an opening to be played by black, at least not on a serious basis. You can try it out a few times, but I'm telling you, you'll probably suffer in these games after the first few games when your opponents figure out what you're doing. This will be a bad experience. So this was my take on this opening. I would say this is opening for online chess, maybe for a few blitz games, but not your main repertoire for sure. Keep it as a side dish, not your main course.